to our annual Holocaust Remembrance event at FLCC. If you could take a few minutes to sign the register that's going to be making the rounds and let us know in what capacity you came, that would be greatly appreciated. I'm Dr. Robert Brown, Professor of History and organizer of the college's History, Culture, and Diversity series. And I'd like to start by expressing my gratitude to the Jewish Federation of Greater Rochester for making this event possible again this year. 2025 is a remarkable year of anniversaries and historic milestones. Some mark the beginning of great events, like the 250th anniversary of the start of the American Revolution in April 1775, and the beginning of what George Washington would ultimately dub the Great Experiment. Other anniversaries this year recall the end of significant occurrences, like the Axis surrender in May 1945 and the conclusion of the Second World War in Europe, which transpired 80 years ago this next month. 80 years ago this month, in April of 1945, contingents of the American Third Army liberated Buchenwald concentration camp, and the 7th Army liberated Dachau. For the over 40,000 inmates of Dachau who had been tortured, starved, beaten, and murdered by the Nazis, April 29, 1945 marked a tragic end. But for the 32,000 survivors rescued by American forces, Liberation Day marked a beginning, the commencement of a mission to preserve the memory of this traumatic episode for posterity and ensure that those who suffered persecution, demonization, dislocation, brutalization, and murder at the hands of Nazi Germany and its allies would not be forgotten by future generations. A conference on Jewish material claims against Germany study, released only this morning, underscores the urgency of this effort and the importance of annual Holocaust remembrance events like this one in promoting intergenerational understanding of the Holocaust legacy. According to Vanishing Witnesses, an urgent analysis of the declining population of Holocaust survivors, the Holocaust generation continues to rapidly dwindle, with many survivors now in their 90s or over 100. If predictions are correct, at least 70% of these eyewitnesses will disappear within the decade, and few will remain to bear testimony to one of history's greatest atrocities. According to Gideon Taylor, president of the Center for the Study of Holocaust Survivor Demography, current trends, quote, provide clear urgency to our Holocaust education efforts. Now is the time to hear firsthand testimonies from survivors and invite them to speak in our classrooms, places of worship, and institutions. It is critical not only for our youth, but for people of all generations to hear and learn directly from Holocaust survivors and their descendants. Our time is almost up, Mr. Taylor warns. Our survivors are leaving us, and that this is the moment to hear their voices. As a professional historian, I'm becoming profoundly disheartened by the world's continued amnesia about the Holocaust and its inability or unwillingness to learn the valuable lessons about the recent past. Since the events of October 7th, 2023, Holocaust denial and anti-Jewish hatred have surged worldwide. According to the Times of Israel, 2024 was, quote, peak year for global anti-Semitic attacks and hate crimes, with a staggering 350% increase in anti-Jewish acts of violence and attacks on synagogues recorded in France. The figures for Australia, Britain, and Canada are even more shocking, at 387%, 450%, and 562% respectively. A recent Anti-Defamation League audit also found 2024 to be a record breaker in the United States, with almost 10,000 anti-Semitic incidents reported last year, the largest number registered in a single year since the ADL commenced compiling data in 1979. The American Jewish Committee's State of Anti-Semitism in America report, which was released in February of this year, is similarly alarming. During the last 12 months, almost 80% of Jewish American adults and young adults reported experiencing anti-Semitism online or on social media, including those who say that they've been personally targeted. Over 3/4 of American Jews say they feel less safe as a Jewish person in the United States since October 7th. Rising levels of hateful behavior and intolerance at U.S. colleges are particularly concerning, with an unprecedented 1,400 anti-Semitic incidents logged on American campuses during the last 11 months alone. The February 2025 American Jewish Committee report found that half of U.S. Jewish college students, they say that they have felt uncomfortable or unsafe at a campus event because they are Jewish. Many have avoided wearing, carrying, or displaying things that could identify them as Jewish, or have avoided expressing views on Israel on campus with classmates because of fears of anti-Semitic reprisals. As I speak, more than 100 U.S. colleges and school districts are under investigation over alleged anti-Semitic incidents and hate crimes, and this includes some of America's most prestigious institutions. During last year's UN annual Holocaust commemoration, Secretary General Antonio Guterres observed, quote, "The anti-Semitism that fueled the Holocaust did not start with the Nazis, nor did it end with their defeat. The Holocaust was preceded by thousands of years of discrimination, expulsion, exile, and extermination. Today we are witnessing hate spreading at an alarming speed. Online, it has moved from the margins to the mainstream, and Holocaust denial and distortion are proliferating. It is up to all of us to defend the truth and to defend our common humanity. Working together, we must combat lies and hate. We must promote Holocaust education as a critical part of our defense against ignorance, indifference, and intolerance. And crucially, we must listen to survivors, and we must remember that demonization of the other and disdain for diversity is a danger to everyone, that no society is immune to intolerance and worse, and that bigotry against one group is a bigotry against all. Thanks to the efforts of first and second generation Holocaust survivors and eyewitnesses like today's guest, our institution is able to contribute in some meager but sincere manner to the fulfillment of Mr. Guterres' vision. We're about to hear the story of the Rayburn family. Allan Rayburn's parents, Sidney and Annalise, were subjected to terrible persecution after Hitler came to power in Germany and were compelled to flee their homeland in February of 1939. Sidney and Annalise spent World War II in England and both served in the British Armed Forces during that conflict. In 1947, the couple emigrated to the U.S., and 2 years later, their son, Allan, our guest, was born in Rochester, New York. After graduating from Arundicoit High School and Hudson Valley Community College, Allan settled in Fairport with his wife, Lenny. There, he enjoyed a fruitful career spanning 50 years in the Rochester area housing industry. He is currently construction manager for Pathstone Corporation of Rochester. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome this year's Holocaust Remembrance speaker, Mr. Allan Rayburn.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Brown, Finger Lakes Community College, and the Jewish Federation of Rochester for inviting me to share my family's Holocaust journey with you. This was written as a safekeeping stories project. The story was written in chapters, one being due each week. Weaving them into a life story was a challenge for me. My father's story is not unique. It's been repeated thousands of times in thousands of families. The story spans approximately 100 years from beginning to end. My father was a character. Like so many survivors, he was small in stature but big in attitude, and didn't like anyone telling him how to live his life. He lived it his way. I don't know of anyone else who, upon hearing that their family's hotel reservation was missing, would unpack their suitcases in the lobby of a busy Las Vegas casino hotel and begin hanging their clothes from the plantings. That was Sid Rayburn. They quickly found rooms for the family. My immediate family lost 42 family members during the Holocaust. It was a part of our lives from my earliest memory. It was never discussed while we were growing up. I never knew other kids in my class, in my school, on my block were going through exactly the same emotions and issues we were. Nothing from Germany was allowed in our house. We were not allowed to learn German, as that's what my parents spoke when they didn't want us to understand their discussion. I never had grandparents, and have always missed that, and wondered what it would be like to have them. My mother cried at every Hanukkah celebration, and I always felt guilty not understanding why. Now I do. This story was written prior to the horrible attack on Israel of October 7th, 2023, and I've agonized over the relevance of the story since that time. But others have encouraged me to continue, that the story is even more relevant now than ever. The recent rise in anti-Semitism would greatly upset my parents. They've always worried this would happen, and this is in their honor. This story extends much beyond a Jewish boy in Germany to include Jews, Christians, and Muslims. This has been a very emotional journey for me, and I'll apologize in advance if my emotions get the best of me during my reading. They usually do. So let's begin. How it began. One day, as my father was preparing to move from his apartment, several years after my mother died, he was showing me a few items he had taken from a drawer in his dresser. He mentioned that he had his Nazi identification. I was shocked to see this cloth billfold neatly folded in quarters with a large letter J on the cover. He'd kept this hidden from us for 50 years. It was in near perfect condition and looked like he'd used it yesterday. He gave it to me that day, and I had it framed with glass both sides so the family could see what he'd needed to carry daily in Germany as a symbol of being a Jew. I've often wondered as I look at this artifact what it must have been like for him the day that he had to report to the Gestapo to have this ID made. Was he alone? Was his mother with him? Was he nervous or fearful? His picture was taken. He was fingerprinted. The obvious questions of his identity and family were asked by the Gestapo. His picture has a look of strength, defiance, and fear in his eyes. What was he thinking? He must have been thinking of his father, who'd recently been taken to Sachsenhausen concentration camp after Kristallnacht, and then released. Was he going next? What was he thinking as his name was changed in front of him, adding Israel as a middle name, forever identifying him as a Jew? Why did he keep this billfold, neatly folded in quarters, all the time he made his way to England? Throughout his time in the British internment camp, his name change in the British Army, his years fighting in India during the war, back to England, through married life in Manchester, in Connecticut, and Rochester. Why keep it hidden from my mother, my siblings, and I for all these years? Why bring it out on this day? I wish I'd asked, but I didn't. So I'm left to my own theories. I think it may have been a metaphor for this portion of his life. Folded and put away in a drawer, not to be looked at, remembered, or discussed, just put away. And when he revealed this billfold, by a casual reference made that day, he began to open up about his life. He'd eventually record a video of his life, return with his family to his hometown in Germany several times, even visiting the home he grew up in, and he would be invited to speak to a of German residents about his life growing up in Halle as a Jew. He would speak at his synagogue about his experiences around Kristallnacht and always encourage us all to never forget. Slide.
Okay, if I can fix that.
The Rautenbergs in Halle. My father, Siegfried Rautenberg, grew up in the city of Halle in Germany. They lived in a comfortable life in a typical German Jewish apartment near the city center. My grandparents, Jacob and Kate, married shortly after my grandfather returned from serving in the German army in World War I in 1918. My grandmother, Kate, cared for the home with help from a live-in housekeeper, Elise, and worked in the family's 3 men's clothing stores. My father's older sister, Gerda, was born in 1920, Dad in 1922, and his younger brother, Werner, was born in 1927, though he died at age 5, they believe, from meningitis. While the neighborhood was mostly non-Jewish, everyone seemed to get along nicely. My grandfather was a proud German veteran, and his army buddies would come to visit occasionally. My father was well-liked, and he participated in clubs, Jewish youth groups, and sports in primary school, and felt no anti-Semitism. The family was not very religious, but they always observed Jewish holidays at synagogue. My father spoke of the custom of having a Christmas tree in their apartment, in addition to a menorah at holiday time, out of respect for their non-Jewish housekeeper. They had packages under the tree, and the children were very close to Elise, with my Aunt Gerda visiting her, and she visiting my Aunt Gerda in England throughout their lives. All this changed in 1933 when the Nazis came to power. My father speaks of this as though he had 2 childhoods, pre-Nazi and post-Nazi. This was also the same year my father moved from primary to a junior-senior high school he called the Gymnasium. The Depression had been raging in Germany for several years, and Hitler blamed the Jews for the state of the economy. My father said things changed quickly at his school, where there were only a few Jewish kids in the school, and they needed to stick together since they were being taunted with fights and threatened by the non-Jewish classmates
Yeah,
daily.
the slide,
Eventually, this became intolerable, and he
slides have
and the
frozen.
other Jewish students left public
I
school
need help
at
with the
the end
slide,
of
it's not changing the
1935,
slides.
at age 13. They were accepted into a private school in 1936 through 38. However, they eventually were shut out of this school also. The Nuremberg laws of September 1935 were changing daily, making it impossible for my grandfather's stores to remain open, as Jewish businesses were being boycotted, and eventually the business failed. The stores closed, and the family moved to a smaller apartment. While life was difficult for the family, they always believed they would be protected, since my grandfather had been loyal to the Kaiser. My father speaks in his oral history of my grandmother always giving him extra money every week to make sure that every child in class had money for lunch. These were hard times for everyone, but neither religion nor politics mattered. In 1938, my father remained out of school, but started in an apprentice program with a Jewish-owned factory in Leipzig. He lived with a local Jewish family being paid weekly by his mother. My father worked in the factory 3 days a week and had classes 2 days. It was here in Leipzig on November 10th, 1938, that my father first learned of Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, and the burning of the synagogue. Slide. Preparations are made. The morning of November 10th, 1938, my father awoke to news of the Leipzig synagogue burning. He first walked to the Frank Brothers factory where he was an apprentice. However, there were groups of Nazis hanging around the entrance, and the factory was closed. His first thought was to get home. He said he was scared that morning, 16 years old and alone, as he made his way to the train station, trying to remain inconspicuous, hearing that synagogues across Germany were burning. He took the train back to Halle, then a streetcar, and walked home as quickly as he could. Next slide, please. Thank you. When he arrived home, the family was busy with phone calls and information about friends and relatives being arrested and taken away. The family knew it was only a matter of time. Within 2 hours of my father's arrival, the Gestapo were knocking on the door. My grandmother told my father to hide in a bedroom and lock the door. The Gestapo entered the apartment and questioned my grandmother, Kate, who lied and told them that Siegfried was in Leipzig during his apprenticeship. They also had that information and said he'd be picked up in Leipzig. My grandfather, Jacob, was immediately taken away with all the other Jewish men that day. No one knew where or for how long. My grandmother was anxious to find a safe place for my father and quickly phoned her uncle in Berlin, George Jacobson, and he agreed to take my father into his home to avoid the Gestapo. My father describes him as a very kind man who was badly injured in World War I. My father left immediately for Berlin. Going to the train station and seeing the Gestapo, he pulled up the collar on his coat around his neck, bought a ticket, and took the 2 to 3 hour train ride to Berlin. When he arrived in Berlin, he could see things were pretty rough. He described the broken glass in the street, stores being looted, and seeing scuffles as Jews were being rounded up. While at his Uncle George's, my dad never went outside, looked out windows, or talked on the phone, since they didn't want anyone to know they were hiding a Jewish boy. My grandmother's Aunt Elsa Jacobson was well connected with the Nazis and didn't like the idea of having my father in the house. It was becoming uncomfortable for him after about 3 weeks when his mother called and said to come home. His father had returned. Slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. When he returned, plans were well underway. The family was trying to get out, but one after the other, the plans failed. They couldn't get to the US, Chile, or Shanghai. It was now mid-December 1938 when my grandparents received word that my father needed to be out of Germany or he'd be arrested on February 28, 1939. My grandmother's brother now lived in Palestine, and his wife had a cousin that lived in Manchester, England. My father's uncle guaranteed that he would send money to support to the cousin Fritz Jacobson in Manchester, and he would pay families to care for the children. So the plan was in place. The children would go to England to live until my grandparents were settled somewhere, and they would send for them. My grandmother made a photo album, got their documents, passports, and letters of recommendation together, and on February 22nd, 1939, they said goodbye at the train station in Halle, all believing they would be together again soon, safe in another country. That was the last time my father saw his parents. And at age 16, he and his sister made their way to England through the Netherlands and on to a new life. Slide. Changes in a new home. Aunt Eva had made the arrangements for my father to live with a Kramrisch family, a Jewish family in Manchester, England. During the day, he worked for a Jewish man who owned an unfinished furniture business, sanding furniture, and at night he attended English classes at the Athenaeum, sponsored by the local Jewish community. He occasionally received Red Cross letters from his parents with news from home, but they remained guarded in what they could say. In June 1940, things began to change, as Britain was now at war. The British had just rescued British and French troops at Dunkirk, and the British were concerned about German spies who might have entered England. My father was interviewed by police and arrested, then held in a series of internment camps in Bradford, Bury, and Shrewsbury, England. After about a 3-month period, he went before a tribunal that asked a series of questions about his past. My father was told he could remain in England and be allowed to join the British Army, however, only in the Pioneer Corps, which was made up of approximately 300 German Jewish young men. They slept on straw mattresses and lived on army bases. My father remembered that he was always hungry. Slide. He served in the British Pioneer Corps for approximately 1.5 years, stationed in several bases around wartime London during the Blitz, going into London daily, doing manual labor of all sorts. In mid-1942, he was given the opportunity to join the British Army Royal Engineer and Mechanical Corps, the REMEs. He was training in Mill Hill to go to Europe after D-Day, when his regiment was told that for their safety and the safety of their families in Germany, they needed to change their names. Thank you. So 320 German Jewish men clamored after one phone book, and each chose a new name. Each soldier had about 1 minute with the book to change their lives, each believing they would change their names back when they got home someday. That day, Siegfried Rautenberg became Sidney Rayburn. It was about this time that the Red Cross letters from home were becoming fewer, and then only Red Cross postcards. And then by mid-1942, they all stopped coming. Nothing more was heard from home. It was not until after the war that he found out that his parents had been killed at a Nazi concentration camp at Sobibor, Poland in 1942. Slide. Thank you. In 1943, my father shipped out to India via the Suez Canal, arriving in Bombay, India. Over the next 3 years, his unit moved through India, Assam, Bangladesh, Calcutta, Mandalay, and ending in Rangoon, a distance of several thousand miles. He was repairing tank gun sights in an advanced base workshop, moving forward as the troops moved towards the Japanese enemy. In each location, he would look for and find a small Jewish community. He spoke of the interesting Jewish community in Rangoon, Burma. Slide. Where, while small, only about 30 active members, had a synagogue and a Jewish chaplain, Dr. Jaffe, and about 20 Jewish British soldiers interacted with the community during his 4 to 5 month stay. In May 1946, he was sent home. The war in Europe was over in 1945, and yet no word from home. He landed in Liverpool, England, and was given a ticket home. Where was home? Wherever his family was. So he went to see his sister in Manchester, and his boyhood friend, Bodo Perlstein, now Bernard Pearson, who had married his sister Gerda. My father now had a brother-in-law and a nephew. Slide. The post-war years. My father, now Sidney Rayburn, met a friend of his sister Gerda. The very first day, he was discharged from the British Army. Her name was Annalisa Pfingst, and She had recently been discharged from the Royal Air Force after serving 3 to 4 years in Britain. She had a similar background to his: German, Jewish, sent to live in England with a family as a teenager, and alone with no surviving parents. They fell in love, were married in March 1947, and started a new life together in Manchester, England. In July 1947, the sergeant's affair took place in Palestine. The killing of 2 British sergeants by the Irgun, the British independence fighters, in retaliation for the hanging of 3 Irgun, caused anti-Jewish rioting in some British cities. My parents had seen this before in Germany and remembered the tragic results of waiting and hoping things would change. In late 1947, they decided to visit Annalisa's sister and family in the U.S., and if they liked it, they would stay. They arrived in New York, February 1948. They settled in Waterbury, Connecticut, with Annalisa's sister, Durley, now Dora, and her husband, Kurt Lerner, another friend of the family and now married. Sidney found work quickly at a local factory. Annalisa, now Anne, was a talented seamstress, having been trained in Frankfurt prior to leaving for England. She also found work quickly. Slide. Several cousins came in summer 1948 for a reunion, having not been together since 1938. The photo of that weekend shows such joy and expressions of peace and reflects the freedom they all must have felt that day. They survived, only them, though not having been together for 10 years. And yet you can see they felt joy that day. I marvel at their tenacity. Within a few months of this reunion, Anne and Sidney came for a visit to Rochester, New York, to visit Anne's aunt and uncle who'd settled here prior to the war. They liked Rochester, and my father, having been trained in optics in the Army, saw opportunity here. His first job was painting the Cole Tower in Pittsburgh. And Anne returned to Connecticut to pack their belongings, and Rochester became their new home for the rest of their lives. I was born in July 1949, and the next generation begins. Julian was born in October 53, Carol in December 55. I'm struck by the changes in my parents' lives in a 15-year period, from their families having a comfortable life in Germany to separation, growth, loss, war, love, all while trying to find a new home and now a family. This took such fortitude, and in writing this, I've learned so much and gained a great deal of love and respect for my father and mother and all they went through. Slide. My father lived a long and rich life, successful in business, from painting the Cole Tower to purchasing manager at Bausch & Lomb, traveling through Asia, then starting and expanding Arundecoid bridal fashions with my mother, retirement, and another successful career in real estate. He worked daily well into his 80s. He passed away 10 years ago. Slide. And people still ask me if I'm related to Sid Rayburn. And I now proudly say yes. The next generation begins. As this Holocaust story nears its end, and by the end I also mean the beginning, through the next generation, I've tried to understand how has this story shaped my life? What's different about my life experience due to the Holocaust? The answer, I believe, is the Holocaust has resonated through every moment of my life. First, the odds of my parents ever meeting, had it not been for the common Holocaust nightmare in their lives, would have been slim. Second, through the upbringing I had, both positive and negative, but mostly positive, I was taught from my earliest memories to be grateful for what we had and try to lift others on our journey. This path was shown to me at a very young age through my parents' involvement with B'nai B'rith and the work they did with the Lewis Street Center in the inner city during the Great Migration north of the 1950s and 60s. I vividly remember them bringing kids back to our house for an afternoon after a sledding outing or picnic for playtime or a meal before they returned home. This may seem small, but left a big impression on me. I was well aware of my parents being immigrants and still trying to find their way in this country and make ends meet. My father was a tough businessman, yet he'd spend his off-work time on a UJA fund drive, B'nai B'rith, or couples club at synagogue. And it's continued in my generation through my brother's career in the fire department, my sister's healthcare service, our sons mentoring in AA and youth football, nephews coaching youth sports, and nieces now offering a kidney trying to extend my life. All this and so many more examples draw a direct line back to a young Jewish couple, slide, trying to find their way in a new country after losing everything and everyone. I was very conflicted about my parents growing up, but now I realize they were just as conflicted as I was. They had no time to process all that had happened to them over the 15-year period prior to me and my siblings, and I'm not sure they ever fully processed it. I know I've tried to use them as an example in my life, and I think that's all any parent can hope for. Their experience was a reason why Lenny and I decided to move back to the city and embrace an urban lifestyle. They were the reason we brought Alma and the other Bosnian kids into our lives, and the reason we continue to work with foreign students from the U of R and RIT through Rochester Global Connections. They were the reason why I felt the need to find out more about my past and brought me here today. And now writing this story has enriched my life. Alma's story. To put the story in context, the year was 1994. 1 year after Schindler's List debuted, 1 year after my parents began to speak about their experiences, 1 year after Elie Wiesel had admonished then President Clinton at the opening of the U.S. Holocaust Museum for not helping the Muslims of Bosnia, as the world stood by and watched another ethnic cleansing Holocaust. A Muslim photojournalist, Robert Aziz from New Hampshire, was invited to the opening of the U.S. Holocaust Museum. He'd covered wars for National Geographic from Vietnam to Bosnia, and his daughter asked why he couldn't help the children of Bosnia. He told me he set out to bring Bosnian children to Exeter, New Hampshire, so they could go to school, be well educated, and prepare for a day when there was no war at home. The story caught the eye of a CBS producer, and I saw a 7-minute TV story about the Muslim children of Exeter on a Sunday morning TV show. I knew immediately this was exactly what I'd been struggling with. How was I going to pay it forward from British families that had taken in both my parents after Kristallnacht and saved their lives? Lenny and I talked about the idea, and we set out to find Robert Aziz in Exeter, New Hampshire. We spoke at length about our backgrounds. He had no application or any formal method of reviewing a family, just a guy who wanted to help. He had friends who were airline pilots for Continental Airlines that got free tickets, a clothing executive for Timberland who gave each child jackets and clothing. A friend had connections at the U.S. Embassy and got visas, and a women's group in Zagreb, Croatia that made the criteria for the selection of the children. This sounds easy, but took over a year with many fits and starts, during which time 70 children in Tuzla, Bosnia, perished from one shell landing in a coffee house in the city. And that pushed everything forward. When we got the call, we only had about 1 week's notice and didn't have a student's name until just a few days before arrival. So we called Allendale Columbia School, where our son Mark had attended, and asked if they'd consider a Bosnian student. They were very enthusiastic and said they'd give full scholarships to as many students as we needed. That said, we drove to Boston, where our son lived, and took my niece Kate, who was about the same age as our student. Slide. We met Robert Nazi on the right, and then we met Alma Moharmagic as she and the 30 other students deplaned in the Boston airport. That's Alma with the pink Mickey Mouse t-shirt. She hates this picture. And she's on the live stream in Bosnia, so. She was 15 years old, tall, scared, spoke beautiful English, and was exhausted, having just completed a 2 to 3 day journey. She had no idea who we were, and we had no way to contact her parents to let them know she'd arrived safely. We spent the night in Boston and tried to comfort her. Lots of crying that night, all of us, as she tried to put her life back together. The first year was tough, as you might imagine. All the problems of a 16-year-old teenager, add the horrors of war, and nonstop worrying about your family back home. She did very well in school. We always instilled in her the reason she was here. Her country would need smart, educated young people when this war was over. We knew she'd go back someday. The war ended and Alma returned in 1997. We had by this time brought several other Bosnian students to Rochester, some living with us, others living with my brother's family and other community members. So we were kept busy trying to solve the problems of several teenagers in a foreign country during a war. Eventually, Robert Hazi brought 91 Bosnian Muslim students to the U.S., and they all went home, and life changed again. Alma wanted to come back to the U.S. for college, and she entered the U of R. She thrived, getting her bachelor's degree, and then stayed working for the university while she got her master's degree in international business from the Simon School. Always at the top of her class, always able to bridge the divide between her homeland and the U.S. She became our daughter. Her parents became our family. We've traveled together in the U.S. through 9 countries in Eastern Europe. When our son Mark was married, Alma was in the wedding. When Alma married in Tuzla, she had 2 sets of parents in the wedding. Her Bosnian parents and her American parents. When we visited Auschwitz, Alma was with us, since her family had lost family there also. Slide. She's married now. They live in Tuzla, Bosnia, have 3 children. She's now brand lead for Central Europe and the Baltics for a division of Johnson & Johnson. And she's chosen to pay it forward by working with Syrian refugees passing through Bosnia on their trek to Western Europe. Slide. So as this ends, it also begins anew, with my task being to tell the story to others, family, friends, anyone that'll listen. It's not just to tell the story of the horror of the past, but to tell the story of the resilience, hope, and chutzpah of these survivors, and how they went on to teach, love, prosper, and gain the admiration of the younger generation. Slide. All the while with a middle finger up at Adolf Hitler. Slide. You can hear my father's life story in his own words at the Rochester Holocaust Survivors Archive at the following link. Slide. Oops. Okay. Oh, maybe the link isn't there.
I don't think it is. I think that's the last
Okay.
slide.
Well, there is a link. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think that material is available on the Jewish Federation's website.
Yes,
It's CHI is the acronym for Center for Holocaust Awareness and Information, and there you can find his
There
father's
is a
testimony.
Rochester Holocaust Survivors Archive with the stories of many of the Holocaust survivors that live in the Rochester area.
Including your father, Sidney? right?
Including my father. Yes, there's a long video. If you want to hear it in his own words, it's there.
Right. Well, you've represented him magnificently today.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. We've got some time for Q&A, and we have someone who, with a portable microphone. If you raise your hand and you'd like to ask Mr. Rayburn a question.
I do have the original, my father's original identification here. If anyone wants to come up afterwards and take a look at it, you're welcome to.
It must have been an experience to visit Auschwitz.
It was a very emotional day. We were fortunate in that we mentioned to our guide that we'd had family pass away there, and so they allowed us to visit with an archivist, and they were able to confirm information that the family had heard about dates and things that had happened, and put things into context for us, and so we were very fortunate, but it was a very emotional time. My mother's parents both died at Auschwitz.
Were you able to determine the fate of some of the other family members?
Yes, I don't remember the dates. My grandparents on my mother's side were both killed on Halloween 1944, within 90 days of the freeing of Auschwitz. So they were very close to the end.
Right. It's a similar experience to Anne Frank, who survived, confinement in that Holland flat, went to Belsen, and there she died just short of the liberation.
Well, they were stepping things up as the Allies were getting closer. So, but if anyone does get a chance to visit a camp, it is a very emotional experience. I'm not saying I'd advise it. It's up to anybody's individual, but it's a very emotional experience, and it's well worth it. And we were very surprised to hear over 1 million people a year visit Auschwitz, which to me is just staggering.
Yeah, and for those who can't venture that far afield, Dachau is much more accessible. My mother and I visited that site when we were in Munich.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it definitely is edifying and sobering.
Yes, it is.
I'm glad that they haven't closed any of the camps down.
Yeah, me too. I think it's important for people to be able to have somewhere to that you can say this definitely happened, because a lot of people are trying to say it didn't happen.
Right. More and more people are saying that, unfortunately, and I think just after the Second World War, there was this kind of ubiquitous acceptance that this was an unprecedented occurrence that would never happen again. But I think you'll concur the way things are developing worldwide, I could very much foresee a similar kind of repeat scenario.
I'd agree. My parents would be shocked, but maybe not.
I don't have a question
Yes, please.
so much as a comment. I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing your story. It's very meaningful. And your family. It's so beautiful. Thank you for those slides.
And for paying it forward. What a
Oh.
magnificent, inspirational example you've set there.
Well, thank you. My brother, too, he's here, and he had a Bosnian student with him, too, and I think we both agreed, my wife, that it has changed our lives. It's,
And you said she's joined us now on our stream?
we were messaging earlier, and she was going to be on the live stream, yeah.
Right. Well, hello to her if she's watching.
Alma.
So, I know there are no dumb questions, but I have a really difficult time understanding how people could possibly say or think that this didn't happen, that the accounts in maybe it's, how could people believe that this didn't happen? There are accounts and personal accounts and photos and camps, and how is it that people can say it's a fake? Truly, I'm asking that question. How is it that they can?
Did you hear her?
And no, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Oh, she's incredulous about how Holocaust denial even exists, considering the body of evidence that exists for it.
I think probably the internet has something to do with that. I'm not sure it was prevalent denier.
Excuse me, it was explained to me at Dachau. My wife's father was interred in Dachau, and it was explained to us that the reason that there's denial is that Dachau was never really a death camp, as Auschwitz or Treblinka or Sobibor, where our father's parents were murdered. It was only a death camp for 6 months. Before that, it was a work camp, and Dachau was a work camp. And so all these Jews, the 6 million, that they don't believe that number anyway, that's inflated, they say, but they died due to typhus and injuries at the work camps. There were no death camps, according to the deniers. So this is how they explain it away.
I can't focus on that. I guess I can only focus on what we know to be the truth and do everything I can to repeat the story.
Right. I mean, that your lived experience. There's
As
no
long
more
as I'm here.
compelling proof than that.
Right, right.
Yeah, and to your point, Dachau was the first camp. It was in operation longer than any others, and for most of the time it was a work camp. But the fact that 40,000 people perished there is some indication, and that is documented. I mean, one of the things the Germans did exceptionally well during the Second World War was be organized and document everything. And despite a comprehensive effort to expunge that evidence in the closing stages of the war, there is such a body of that exists to certainly confirm the numbers that we have. 6 million minimally. If anything, historians, I think, are, as they dig deeper into the archives and get access to previously undiscovered archives, because much of this is coming out now that we're in the 80th anniversary cycle, we're revising the figures up, not down.
And I think that was Jews. When you add in gypsies and LBT, homosexuals and everything else that went on. I think it was far higher than that.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I did have a question whenever you guys are ready.
Yes,
So,
please.
I know you said that you had visited Auschwitz in the past. Do you think you would ever visit again or any other camps?
Ooh. Will I be going to Auschwitz again?
Just that or any other
I-
camps that are still around? If
I
you would
have
ever be
mixed
willing to.
feelings about it. I would like to, and well, I mean, you can't like to go to a death camp, but I'd like to take another generation there, be it my children, my grandchildren. Somebody has to tell the next generation this happened. And so I'm not sure I'll be able to, but I would like to. I'm continually trying to find more information about my family. I know there's certainly more information out there. I know that there's a lot of information about my grandfather. The pictures that you saw of my grandfather, the only pictures I've ever seen of my grandfather. But from what I understand, Sachsenhausen concentration camp has pictures of a lot of the prisoners. And so I've been trying to find out if there's a picture or pictures of him there. They've recently, in the last couple of years, they no longer have an archivist for their photographs, so it's become harder. But I am in touch with someone there who's trying to help me see if I can get pictures. A German historian who's.
Well, I do also want to thank you again. The fact that you're able to tell your family story is very powerful, and it
I'm
really
sorry.
does show how strong
Thank you.
you are. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I've enjoyed the opportunity.
And it might be somewhat encouraging to hear that in Europe, because of the proximity, there is a regular sort of migration of students to Auschwitz, Dachau, Belsen, some of the other camps that
Yep.
have become memorials. Logistically, obviously, few of us will be able to do that, but there's the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., which is
Oh.
fairly accessible.
Yes. And there's actually a display in Toronto this summer from Auschwitz. And if you have a chance, it's at the Royal Ontario Museum through the summer with a very large exhibit from Auschwitz. There's also, I don't know, part of the Anne Frank house has been brought to New York, and that's open now in New York City.
And at the very least, as we mentioned, you can jump on the Jewish Federation of Greater Rochester's archive and relive the
Yes.
stories. Please have your children and their children do that. That's the best way to keep the memory alive.
There's also the Mount Hope Cemetery is piggybacked on this, and they're working with the Holocaust Survivors Archive, where you'll be able to go to the graves of Holocaust survivors at Mount Hope. And with the QR code, their stories will come up just on your phone. So pretty cool stuff.
Right. I think it's a magnificent thing what you did with the Bosnian student.
Thank you.
Is that accessible to everyone? Or is it is it very daunting logistical project to do?
Well, this took one person who wanted to help. Robert Aziz deserves all the credit for this. There was no government or group involvement. It was just him when his daughter turned to him and said, "How come you can't help?" And he just had had enough of wars. And so he's a magnificent example to me of what one guy can do.
Sure.
As I said, he brought 91 kids here. And the whole idea was nobody was able to go to school there. There was going to be a gap where students were not educated. And so he was, with these 90 students, they were able to go on to college, and hopefully they'll be the leaders in Bosnia and surrounding countries.
Sure. And given the ongoing strife in the world today, I'm sure there are ample opportunities for those who are inclined, to take someone in.
Absolutely. Rochester Global Connections is a great way to work with a foreign student in Rochester, and I don't know, maybe Canandaigua or the Finger Lakes area, but through RIT and U of R. There are foreign students that don't know anybody, have no way to see. The foreign students we've taken, they hadn't been to Canandaigua Lake, they hadn't been to the Finger Lakes or seen anything. They're just on campus all the time. So it's a place for them to spend holidays and go out to dinner and see the Finger Lakes and all that this area of the state has to offer. So it's an interesting thing. And that's open to anyone.
I've got one question. What is a lesson that you've learned about humanity and society over your life and experience and your father's experiences?
What is it that I've learned about humanity?
Or what's a lesson that you'd want the younger generation to know?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the last part.
What is it that you would like the younger generation to know?
Okay. I think what I'd like the younger generation to learn out of this is you can make a difference. It doesn't, you'll be watching TV, you'll be on your phone, something will cross your path, and there'll be a fork in the road, and you'll say, "That's interesting, I could do that." My advice to you would be, do it. Don't think about it too much. Move forward with it, because it could be the best experience you've ever had.
Do you know if at what length they discuss the Holocaust in high school?
What length, what? I'm sorry.
At what length they discuss in high school?
Oh.
Teaching it.
I don't know. I know that the Jewish Federation offers speakers to the school. I believe 7th grade is when it's discussed. I think that it seemed to be the optimum time to approach kids with it. I know that the Jewish Federation offers the opportunity to Jewish young people to go to Auschwitz every summer and Israel and interact with Israeli students. But I don't know how much in high school is taught. Junior high I do, but.
Yeah, my daughter is a teacher and in the city schools. And they are getting rid of a lot of things. And social studies seems to be one of the things that they don't teach as much as they did in the past.
I think that's true of history. I don't know that history is taught as much as it was, but I think it's the only way we learn from our mistakes.
Right.
You know.
Thank you.
Anybody else? One last question, maybe?
Oh, I think there's
Wait for the microphone. No?
Oh, the link she was asking about. I don't know what happened to that slide, but it's, if you Google Rochester Rochester Holocaust Survivors Archive. It'll come up. And then it's all alphabetical in there.
Or robert.brown@flcc.edu, and I'll send it on to you.
Just to answer this lady's question regarding the school districts, the Jewish Federation is also has teamed with the former Temple Emmanuel in Batavia, and they are with Genesee County school districts. They are presenting programs through with survivors and second-generation survivors throughout the Genesee County schools, where there isn't a large contingent of or Jewish families there. So there are many in the rural areas that don't know any Jews, and so they are making a definite impact with teaching with the Holocaust, about the Holocaust with survivors and two-gen survivors.
Great, thank you. So if anyone would like to see Mr. Rayburn's father's document, you're welcome to come up after and take a look. But thank you again very much for coming and sharing your time and your stories.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And thanks to everyone else for turning out and supporting Holocaust awareness this year. Thank you.